Hey everyone, it's Tia from EMP Designs here, and today we're going to be looking at our 5-channel strip controller. I'll be covering how to set up your controller and also the features that come with it, but straight away we can see just how slim this LED controller really is. Once we've brought in our LED strip, we'll be able to clearly put this into perspective, but first we need to connect our antenna. Connecting the antenna is pretty straightforward. You'll see the other end of the antenna on the board, and these will click into each other. You can orientate it however you want, but I'll often just leave it parallel to the controller. So once we've finished doing that, we can begin connecting our desired LED strip. I'll be connecting my 24-volt strip straight to the board to demonstrate it as an example. However, when we move on to the use of Bicolour later, we'll be using wires, and you may simply find connecting wires more convenient for your purpose. Setting this step up properly will make this really easy for yourself and avoid any troublesome encounters. So I would suggest propping your LED strip upright so that the LEDs are facing upwards, and also giving yourself plenty of strip outwards. This will ensure that it's lying flat to the bench. You'll also want to position the controller so it's at the same natural angle as the strip, and you can either clamp them overlapping at this stage, or you can just hold them in place with your hands. I would recommend a small solder tip. I feel it gives me more control when soldering these, and helps me from accidentally shorting channels together. You can see here I'm making very small adjustments with my fingers to the controller and strip to make sure they're lining up in the middle. I'll also mention that you should make sure your common positive on your LED strip is connecting to the top of your controller. Once you've got one connection and your controller and strip are lined up, the rest of this process will be nicely set up for you. You can now go through soldering the rest of your connections together, occasionally cleaning the tip of your iron, and take your time. Altogether, this process took me around 1.5 minutes to set up and solder these 6 connections, and I think the final result is truly worth it for that perfectly seamless controller. So once we're done, we can check over our connections and making sure there are no shorts or gaps between a controller and the LED strip. I had a quick check here myself, and after I'd established there were no breaks or shorts, I could move on to connecting my power cables. In order to do this, I'll be using a power supply I've set to 24 volts. So after I've set my power supply, I'll get my cables ready. You can either check the orientation for the wires from this video, or you can check your controller for the labels. Using a tool to press down on the terminal block, simultaneously insert your wires. I give them a little pull before turning on my power supply, just to make sure that they're secure and that there's no exposed wires. Our final step before we can see our controller in action is to sync up a radio desk. To do this, all we have to do is press the sync button on a compatible desk. It can be difficult to see, but there is a green LED on the controller, and by using either that or the green LED on the desk, we can see once we've connected when it turns solid. After that, we've now got controls in channels 1 to 5 for individual control. Individual control is our default mode with the starting address of 1. And the connections on your strip may be in a different order, but in my case channels 1 through 5 are cold white, blue, red, green, and then warm white. So now we've set up our controller and everything is working, we can explore the other modes the strip controller offers and change our address if needed. These settings will have to be changed through the use of RDM. You can do this in a couple ways, however I synced up to a SkyCast with RDMX Workshop to change modes. Before that though, to desync our controller from our current desk, we can either hold the button on the controller shown above, or hold the sync button on our transmitter. After disconnecting from our desk, we can now move on to connecting to our SkyCast. This step is nice and simple. I'm going to plug in my SkyCast and give it a second to power up, and I'll also make sure that my strip controller is ready to pair, and this will be determined if the green LED is blank. After that, I just have to press sync on my SkyCast and wait for the flashing LEDs to transition to a slow, consistent pace. That lets me know that we've paired successfully. Now we can search up our SkyCast's IP in order to check our SkyCast has RDM enabled. This setting is what will allow us to communicate the changes we make through RDMX Workshop. Our next step is to bring in RDMX Workshop and change our network interface to match the one of our SkyCast. So by searching through our connected SkyCast, we can look through our Output tab and find any connected RDM devices. This is where we will find our 5-channel strip controller and access our settings for the device. By right-clicking on the tab, we can easily access all of the settings we need to change. In the personality settings, we can see our 3 different modes and the amount of channels they each use. In order, these modes are individual control with global brightness, and Bicolour. We can also change the starting address here, but I'll leave it at 1 throughout the rest of the video. So coming back to the video, we'll have to disconnect from our SkyCast and reconnect to our radio desk. I've since switched to mode 2, which is individual control with global brightness. And this mode essentially offsets individual control by a channel and uses the first channel instead to control the overall brightness. This feature makes it useful for adjusting the brightness without having to adjust all other channels individually. Some examples could be if you're using a specific mix of colours, or you may be running multiple strips that you want to make sure you can adjust the brightness of each at the same time. I'll quickly run through each channel just to show you that they're in the same place as individual control, just one channel along. Moving on, I'll be switching LED strips for a Bicolour strip and we'll have to change to mode 3. Changing modes will be the same process as last time and the strip will be similar. The difference when connecting my Bicolour strip was I used wires instead and used connections 1, 2, 4 and 5, deliberately leaving the third connection blank. With these connections in place, I'll have control of the 2 strips and we'll be able to adjust their brightness and colour temperatures separately. So in order to do this, I'll use channels 2 and 4 to adjust their colour temperature, as you see in the video here, and 1 and 3 are going to adjust the brightness of the strips. And that covers how to set up your 5-channel LED strip controller, adjust the settings, and use modes 1 through 3. I hope you found this video helpful, and as always, if you've got any further questions, you can get in touch with us using the email in the description.